it's the graveyard shift on day one of Interchange, and I'm really happy to see that there is a good number of people in the session. So thank you for making the effort to come, probably enticed by our amazing panel that we have. Because this is the Places theme, and there's been enough talk about 1.5 million houses, we're going to talk about jobs. And transport what is the role of transport in the economic engine and driving the engine for creation of jobs? We're going to have a bit of an introduction from the panel. I should probably introduce myself first. I always forget to do that. I'm Lee Stolworthy. I'm the Transport Planning Discipline Lead at Stantec, based in Birmingham. And we're going to run through the panel. We're going to introduce themselves. As a panel, we have decided we're not going to waste time on presentations, and we're going to get straight into the conversation. So we will get into some of the conversation. I have questions. I'm sure you do too, so we'll have a Q&A towards the end. And then we'll run into just a final wrap-up. So we'll probably have about 30-minute conversation, 10-minute intros, 30-minute conversation, and about 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll just wrap up. And I think that adds up to 60 minutes, although we're already 5 minutes late. So without further ado, should we start with some introductions? And panel members, please introduce yourselves and tell us where you're from, what you do, and why job creation is important for you and why you want to be part of this conversation. Start on that side, I think. David.
Hi, so it's David Nuttall. I'm a director at HBD. I specialise in industrial logistics. HBD is part of Henry Boot PLC, so that's a 140-year-old Yorkshire-based effective propco. We have a residential arm. We do some land promotion. In Manchester, we've done things like campus and bits on Deansgate, but we're kind of cross-sector, cross-country. I think, obviously, for us, transport, depending on the sector we work in, it's really important, obviously, to get people in and out of our schemes. Primarily, sort of my sector, logistics. Road transport's the number one thing you look at when you're looking at a site. The quality of logistics is improving, so there are other facets now to the jobs on those sites, so a more versatile transport mix is becoming more important as well. And obviously, being selfish, the cost of transport's important because it's a cost that we're often having to bear as part of the schemes, even though some of the identified sites are being identified not by us.
Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Lewis. I'm the CEO for Connected Places Catapult, and we are one of the 9 catapults in the UK. We look at transport, construction, infrastructure, and some data infrastructure. And what we're looking at doing is working with those SMEs, so connecting the SMEs that can help bring innovation into those systems with the demand side, so with those large public sector bodies and those large primes, so that we are getting innovation into the system and making sure that the money that we're spending in creating new infrastructure also creates new solutions and new jobs.
I'm Bridget Rosewell. I guess for the last 30 years I've been working on infrastructure, job creation, why you build it, what for, and what it's actually going to achieve in your economy. So how the economy fits together and grows has been at the centre of what I've done for the GLA, for the National Infrastructure Fund, for Commission, for the National Infrastructure Bank, National Wealth Fund, for water companies, you name it, I've been doing it. Most recently, working with Prism Global on the Rosewell review of transport priorities and capital priorities for the West Midlands Combined Authority.
Thanks. Claire?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Claire Pearce, former Chief Planning Officer at Sedgemoor District Council, Project Director leading the public sector response to Hinkley Point C, creating 25,000 jobs, 15,000 on site today. And before going over across to Salamanca Group, where I led the consenting strategy, securing the Tata Agratas Gigafactory on a site, Junction 23, on the M5, again creating 7,500 jobs. Now running my own business, largely deployed in Dorset, known as the Jurassic Coast, and a very beautiful area, known for its tourism, but probably less known for the fact that it's the largest onshore oil field in Western Europe. It's got its closed nuclear facility. It's got brilliant geology and geology for ports, carbon capture and storage, offshore wind, and new nuclear. The reason I'm interested in Dorset as a place for economic transformation, even though it has no motorways, bearing in mind today's conversation, is that it's lost 8,000 jobs in the last few decades. So it can't survive as an area. Its young people are leaving, and actually there's very little purpose to a place if it doesn't have that underpinning economy. So we're looking at pivoting Dorset pretty quickly, actually, to welcoming large-scale investments and creating a new era of opportunity and rebuilding its industrial base. That's through the energy sector, but also through defence. And you only have to look at the news at the moment to realise that defence is a key issue, and therefore the transport system is a key issue in moving that defence across our country. The resilience of our motorways, our ports, all has an increased focus at the moment. So I'm really interested in how we can start thinking about that in the context of rebuilding our industrial base. And I also represent over 100 businesses in the Southwest from all sectors, the chair of Southwest Business Council, so have an interest in the Southwest as a whole.
Brilliant, thanks, Claire. And then bringing it back home to Manchester, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Steve Warrener. I'm the Managing Director at Transport for Greater Manchester. I've been with TfGM in various guises for nearly 19 years, overseen the build-out of quite a significant amount, £3 billion plus of infrastructure that hopefully many of you have used and or will use over the course of the next couple of days. And we have introduced the B network, which many of you will be familiar with, which is the first stage towards a London-style integrated transport network. We took back local control of the bus network last year. We were the first authority to use the powers in the Bus Services Act, and that was just over a year ago. We completed that, that integration. Why is transport important? Transport, and we'll come back to it, so I won't labour the point, Lee. Transport is a huge enabler for economic growth. The infrastructure that we put in the ground over the last 20 years has been underpinned by its ability to deliver growth, and we have done that very successfully, I believe. Greater Manchester grown at a faster rate than the vast majority of the rest of the country, and the B network and bus in particular has seen growth in transport usage in a way that everywhere else in the country, including London, has seen decline. So really looking forward to the discussion today, Lee. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Steve. So just rules, there aren't any rules. I'll ask some questions who I think probably the best panelists to answer them, but feel free to jump in on that particular topic if there's a point that you would like to make. So I think starting with you then, Steve, and myself being a transport planner as long as I can remember, it feels to me right now, or maybe for the last couple of years in recent times, that the political penny has finally dropped, that transport is an enabler for economic growth and development. But the penny's dropped before and rolled under the table. Somebody found it and dropped it again. So it's cycles, right? But we're riding the crest of the wave now. But in that, there's some risks associated with it, I think. So transport is an engine for growth, or is it just an enabler at best? And if we are pinning everything on all the hopes onto transport as an enabler and investing in it, are we over-investing? Are we running the risk of over-investing in transport and under-investing in the other things that also generate economic growth? And what are those things, and how do you deal with that in Manchester?
Wow. Look, I think the evidence is there that transport is a key enabler of growth, an enabler of productivity. It's an enabler for accessibility, but you're absolutely right. Looking at transport on its own has risk. What we're doing in Greater Manchester is looking at the infrastructure as part of what we're describing as an integrated pipeline. So don't just look at transport separately. Don't just look at skills. Don't just look at housing. Look at how one absolutely enables another. And that might mean, for those working in public transport, some quite challenging choices, actually, because whilst we might promote sustainable transport, be that bus, tram, active travel, for some developments, what you actually need is highways. So we are going through quite a big piece of work at the moment to develop that integrated pipeline. We're fortunate, as are many other big city regions, to have had quite a sizable capital settlement from government. So we're looking at how transport enables a number of those elements. But I think the evidence is there in Greater Manchester. I've lived here for far too many years, and not because I don't love it, just because I don't like thinking that I'm quite as old as I am. And transport's enabled growth. The city centre of Greater Manchester was a completely different place when I was growing up many moons ago. And I think one of the other challenges we've got, Lee, is to ensure that it isn't just the city centre that benefits. Greater Manchester's a big place, quite rural actually, in many areas. So how do we ensure that that growth and that economic benefit spins out across the whole of the city region?
Thanks. So I want to pick up back on that integrated pipeline later.
Sure.
But first question for you, Bridget. Have we been guilty of investing in transport that has overpromised on economic generation? Are there examples of that?
No. So if you think about, we underinvested in transport, partly because we haven't made cases for transport which have built the economic case associated with it. With the result, we've just underinvested in infrastructure and transport, full stop. When I did the case for the Thames Gateway Bridge, the Humber Bridge kept being flung at me as, oh, well, look, here's the example. This is the only one that anybody could ever find of an example of a piece of transport infrastructure which didn't generate the growth. Well, there was never any growth. It was an entirely political decision about a by-election. But if you think about all the others, we made cases for transport, which was all based on the speed with which you could get from A to B, and the assumption that the economy was a separate activity. So the cases were all based wrongly, with the result we just underinvested. It wasn't the risk that we overinvested in the infrastructure and didn't invest in other things. We just didn't invest in infrastructure in order that we could do the other things. Yeah. And sometimes it's just that spare capacity that matters. If I think back to London, in the 60s and 70s, there are 1 million jobs in manufacturing in London. Now there are a couple 100,000, if that. But there are more than 1 million jobs in London in services. How did that work? All the manufacturing bits were around the north and south circulars, to orders of magnitude. But we replaced all of those. People replaced them. Investors replaced them with jobs in services in the centre. And that could only happen because there was enough spare capacity on the underground system to allow that movement of jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. So
until we needed, then it got too crowded, and then we needed Crossrail and the reinvestment in the Northern Line and all the other things that we had to do. When you were there too, when Anthony was there, and that's what we fought for and did.
But key to all of that is the integration of all of those things.
And that key to that is devolution.
Right. So going back to the integration and devolution, the integrated pipeline that you spoke about, and transport is a key element of that. So the pipeline for transport to unlock economic growth. This is for you, Steve. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. I'm looking at you, but I didn't say it was for you. But so the integration of land use and transport is key to that pipeline, right? So I think we use the word enabler too much in transport conversations. It is an enabler, and as Bridget has quietly pointed out, is that there's no such thing as bad investment in transport. If you do it in the right way, you will generate economic growth, right? But it's also an informant, because if you call it an enabler, then it implies that it comes after some other stuff, but it actually comes before some things and together with things at the same time as other things, so that you get that integrated pipeline. Is that your view as well, and how do you deal with that in
I think it is, and for those of you who've seen the Greater Manchester strategy, which we launched last year, that really highlights the ambition for Greater Manchester and really highlights the role of transport as a means of providing opportunity for our residents, almost regardless of where they live in the city region. And then what we've then said is, how do we develop an integrated pipeline that sets out how we're going to invest in those priorities. And much as I'd like it to be, it really isn't all about transport. It's about housing, employment space, broader infrastructure. And then we've set out in our local transport plan that's available on one of the stands outside how transport goes about enabling. But you're absolutely right. Enabling can mean many different things for different people. But it means that developments can be designed as far as possible to deliver sustainable transport solutions, fewer car parking spaces, denser development, and one of the schemes that we're particularly proud of, and some of you may well have been there, is Stockport, which is a 10-minute train journey from here. And when we developed the interchange at Stockport, brand new one that replaced something that had been there from when I was a young boy, what we did was combine housing and transport. We developed we developed them both together, and we've got a big residential block that sits alongside a transport interchange that sits within a park, in a part of the city region that, whilst is reasonably close and reasonably accessible, isn't within the town centre. And we're looking to do the same again at other locations. So it enables development, it definitely enables opportunity, it enables growth, but it's important to keep circling back. Stockport's something, as I say, we're particularly proud of, but equally it doesn't mean that Stockport, as it does grow, as we've seen in the centre of Manchester, that we don't need to go back and see what transport solutions are needed in each of the areas within Greater Manchester. So yes, it is, but it isn't the be-all and end-all.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's easy to start to think about, economic engines of growth and job creation as locational specific. But I'm going to come to you now, Erica. Are we leveraging the actual process of delivering transport infrastructure enough to create jobs itself?
So we do that a bit. We could do it a lot more. We're in this wonderful position. Rachel Skinner said this morning, I don't know whether you heard her opening address, with all her positivity, we've got £725 billion worth that the government has promised in its infrastructure strategy. And I said to my team, so if you look at how many jobs could be created with that spend, and if you think about perhaps even just 1% of that spending going on innovation, given the kind of figures that we get back in terms of the work that we do around accelerator programs, that could create around 600,000 new jobs. That's a massive opportunity off the back of what is a very small percentage of that large investment. And that would be potentially somewhere around 18,000 new solutions to problems. So really interesting. And we really need those startups, I think. You see them around the hall. For people who've been wandering around the hall, they're there to upgrade ticketing systems, think about decarbonisation in terms of materials, in terms of fuels, thinking about bringing new skills to the table, supporting legacy systems by using new systems like AI and data-led software. So in a nutshell, not only can we see new solutions, but we can absolutely see jobs coming from that actual construction process. Yes.
Thanks. So these are, and you mentioned accelerator programs. How does that work for these innovators that are sort of ancillary to the bulk transport infrastructure that we all know?
Yeah, so this is, so really the kinds of work that we do in Connected Places Catapult is we work with those commissioning agents in effect and help them to think through what are the outcomes that they want, what are the challenges that they're trying to address. And definitely if we can get them at the planning stage, then that's really good. And what we're saying then is, don't go out and buy the usual product solution, but actually think about that challenge and think about whether or offer out that there may be some other solutions that can come through. At that point, you open the door to these different kinds of solutions and the kind of businesses that you see exhibiting here, and obviously that grows year on year. But that's through opening the door for there to be a different way of solving a problem.
Yeah. Are there
Creating
any?
an opportunity is a bet at the same
Yeah,
time, isn't
exactly,
it?
yeah.
And so one of the things that really annoys me is when you say, oh, this will create so many jobs, because it needs people to create jobs.
Yeah.
It's not a sort of an abstract thing. So what I really like about what you're saying is that you're opening opportunities for new things to come along, but not all of them are going to work. And we have to be willing to make those bets, because
To
you want the
take some
future
risks.
not to be like the past.
Yes.
And therefore, the plan where you're taking everything on the basis of a model and data that's based on the past, the whole point is we want to change the future.
Yes. And some of it's incremental. So some of it is, new solutions that are building on
Yeah.
old solutions. So, and you see that particularly with the database solutions that we're seeing here today, and there are many, many of them. That's about making the system slicker. So coming up with ways that you can think about, where are there peaks and troughs, for example, in use of transport? How can you smooth that out? If you're going to, for example, think about digging up your road, can you do a bit of planning so that you know which is the best time of day to actually do that? So we work with an SME called Ulchira, who were part of one of our programs. They're here today. I think their CEO is actually on a different panel in a different room right now. And what they do is they use data systems to help large highway bodies think about when's the best time and therefore like lowest cost time to do those kinds of work. Great solution, not a very big change actually, that's just more about using data and AI to help plan better.
Excellent. And are there any barriers to SMEs in getting involved in these processes?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a really complicated business. You've got fractured ownership, you've got very high levels of legislation, very high levels of health, absolutely rightly, safety requirements, for example. And so for SMEs, and this is where the work that we do is partly on that supply side. So working with those SMEs so that we go through the kind of due diligence processes with them, get them to a situation where there's enough trust between that large commissioner and those SMEs and sort of do a bit of matchmaking in effect.
Yeah.
It's incredibly successful. So where we have had accelerator programs that are attached to either key challenges or key bits of infrastructure development, so HS2, we ran an accelerator program for HS2, then those SMEs get a chance to actually work on some proper infrastructure building, and then they are in a really good position to get contracts not only from other infrastructure providers, and it doesn't need to be in the same sector, by the way, it could be in construction. A lot of these solutions are transferable, but also around the world.
Yeah. So a multiplier effect of not only creating additional jobs, but getting it better and more innovative solutions in the process.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So I want to jump to another topic at the moment, which is kind of similar to that, but it's about investment and where we do it. So, intercity versus intracity. And this is a question for you, Bridget, and some of the stuff that you've done. Agglomeration, does that generate higher economic growth for agglomeration within an inner city versus investment in transport systems that link city regions together?
So the concept of agglomeration is how you get different firms, different sectors together, and then there are feedback loops between them. And that was very much the basis of all the work I did around Crossrail, Elizabeth Line, to get that over the line as something which would be bigger than the sum of the parts, if you like. And it's that margin of productivity that you can get by bringing people together. Now, you can do that between cities to some extent as well. I mean, the obvious story is the commuter networks that come into a big city like a Birmingham or a Manchester. But equally, you can do, say, Leeds to Manchester. You create a more effective labour market where you get the opportunity to stay around in a place, move your job, or your partner move their jobs, and you can sort of have that flexibility, which otherwise can often drive people to London. That can only be facilitated by having the right mix, as Steve was saying, of where people can live and how they can move around. So that is really important. But of course, there's also the long distance stuff, which is also important, whether that's with ports or to airports, but also between cities. Not sure we ever really grounded that properly for HS2, for example. What was actually the purpose of faster intercity journeys? Was that really necessary? perhaps not. And in fact, it's my biggest regret that I spent so much time trying to justify that. But what was lacking was those east-west linkages, not the north-south ones. And to facilitate intercity, which was also almost creating an intra-city network at the same time.
So if we'd focus the effort rather than on the north-south HS2, but in east-west connecting across England, do you think that would have returned better economic growth and development opportunities than investing in HS2? Or would do?
I think so. I mean, I've not done the work, incidentally, but I suspect so. And certainly when at the National Infrastructure Commission, we did a study on rail needs for the Midlands and the North, that was the conclusion.
Yeah. Okay.
That yes, stick with the HS2 that we were already building, although in fact we're not even building that one, but concentrate on east-west for Oxford, Cambridge, well, that was a bit further south, but that's important, but equally Derby, Nottingham, Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, those are the linkages which are not good enough, actually in any dimension, roads as well.
I think if you can use the infrastructure more efficiently as well, so I think if HS2 is HC2, so high capacity 2,
yes,
getting in the freight traffic improved, that would have been massive benefit for the northern ports, the infrastructure up here, you know, getting people east to west, not on the road, but on the train and the tram, so you can actually use the road for, you know, you can't get all the freight on the rail, but if you can get it more quickly on the road, it kind of increases the tacho time, and obviously we're going to maybe driverless trucks and AI, but, you know, the principle is if you start in traffic, you can't move stuff as quickly, you've got to be in a different location. That's not good for anybody, and then you can't recruit staff, so you're thinking, well, can I put my warehouse or my office somewhere nearby where I can recruit staff, actually rather than where the supply chain is, and it's just, it's making that little tweak in that kind of operational shift to say, well, actually, it doesn't really need to be here if we just moved X, Y, and Z around. The infrastructure is probably already there, but there's like a slight behavioural pattern and a slight different time shift or just a few tweaks, and actually, it might not be that bad if we can just shift it slightly as opposed to suddenly say it's all about getting to London quickly, which personally I'd love because it knock a few hours of travel off my month. But nonetheless, actually, a massive amount of freight on the West Coast would have been great for work and the North. Yeah.
So I forgot to mention in the beginning that some of the things that come out in the conversation today are not going to be comfortable, possibly. And as Paul Wheeler from Meeting of Minds has said, it's the grit in the oyster that makes the pearl. So yeah, HS2 versus East-West. That was a question that I wanted to smuggle in there, but I'm glad you mentioned it, Bridget. But I think, you know, we've been talking a lot about urban and it's in the urban context, and I think coming off the back of what you just said, David, and without going into the weeds of appraisal and Green Book, and I think that's been done quite a bit today already, is the rural versus the urban. And is there a systemic problem with the way that gets assessed and appraised and funded? And Claire, in your experience in the Southwest, is that a big challenge?
It is a big challenge, and I think some of the issues that we've heard about today are nice issues to have. You know, city regions present huge opportunities. In the Southwest, we only have one mayoral combined authority in Bristol. That leaves a whole massive part of the region which is unrepresented, so I am worried about the speed of devolution and where that leaves a very large part of our geography. I would love to see more emphasis on spatial planning, helping to identify infrastructure priorities. I guess I'm going to be consistent with what Steve has already said, is that if you look at the Southwest as a whole, you need to look at it as a whole, whether that's reservoirs, grid upgrades, nuclear power stations, ports, and then you need to look really at what the balance and what the priorities are relative to that. So one of the biggest challenges I think we face in the Southwest is quite fragmented in terms of local authorities, fragmented in terms of sectors. So you have, you know, the rail bunnies, you know, looking at, you know, rail connectivity, you know, you have, you know, national highways looking at the M5. We had the 303 being dropped. You know, we're delivering a nuclear power station on quite a poor M5 corridor, which has massive demands in peak times. We're just loading that again now with one of the biggest gigafactories in the country on the same motorway junction. So there are lots of issues I think that we need to face, but I would really like to see more work coming through the infrastructure strategy, more coherence around policy frameworks and timelines. The current long-term infrastructure plan is only 10 years. In my world, that's quite short-term.
Yeah.
A lot of the place-led visions I do are 50 years. So for me, I would like to have more long-term thinking, more spatial integration. And one example of something recently that I've been quite impressed by is the work in the energy sector. So we seem to be doing a lot more work as a UK on energy system planning through NESO and looking at that. And that's way ahead of transport in terms of spatial planning, UK-wide, regional, transition plans. I think maybe transport's falling a little bit behind some of those other sectors, and I see, well, Rachel Reeves and others saying that we're going to get more sectors following along, so I'm kind of wondering, when they're going to be, and are we going to have a national transport strategy?
Yeah.
The national land use conversation that was started last year kind of misses out industry and energy. So for me, that's not a land use strategy. So we're still very fragmented.
Yeah.
So rural has to be very different, I think. And we have to think about strategic assets. So when I look at a place like the Southwest, I look at the M5 and the 303 corridor, Hinckley, the Gravity site, the Southwest ports, all as economic assets.
Yeah.
How can we best use those in the context of UK PLC? And actually then what is the infrastructure required to service those? Because the roads in the Southwest are really critical for journey time reliability, freight, logistics, defence, all of those kind of things. Yet many of them are fragile, not resilient. Climate change wipes some of them out.
Yeah.
So I think a broader appraisal system is needed, but I think looking at, infrastructure priorities as a whole rather than just transport.
There was a lot in there, but I think just pulling some things out of it that stood out for me is obviously that fragmentation at central government and the joined up approach between different central government departments and the ability to fund different aspects of the things that you need to do it in a rural context. That's critical, and there might be sectors other than transport that are ahead of the game on that, like the energy sector, but something that you mentioned now, but also in your introduction right in the beginning, was climate shocks and resilience. So do you think that in the rural context, resilience is a stronger metric than just a BCR, for example, or a combination of the two?
I never liked BCRs. I've seen so many cases where BCRs have been used as a force for bad, as a reason for not doing a scheme, whether it's a motorway junction that just has its ramps assessed, and guess what, the BCR's terrible. So I've never had good experiences around BCRs. I've been part of the system to make a BCR work, to get it externally funded. I do think we need to focus more on the strategic rationale for schemes. The BCR, of course, is always going to be part of the overall decision, but I do sometimes wonder who the decision maker is and have they already made their decision and actually they're just using the BCR to justify it.
Yeah, I think that the climate shocks and increasing frequency of those, as well as the defence thing, might be an accelerator for the change in the way that operates. But I think just go back to
the risk piece. So you're right, absolutely right. The BCRs have been used as a kind of black box, big stick thing, if that's not a mixed metaphor, but without actually being able to think about resilience and risk management and spare capacity that you need to be able to cope with something else coming along. As I said, London had spare capacity in its transport system that enabled it to recover from the manufacturing losses. Other cities didn't, partly because they didn't have that capacity to allow people to move around. And the BCRs will never pick any of that up. But planning for opportunity, rather than planning on the basis of some historical model, some clever consultants, and put my hand up, well, not necessarily clever, but certainly a consultant, running models to say it's going to be like this, it's going to be like that, and there's your BCR. And it's just rubbish.
Yeah, so we can make braver decisions if we stop pretending that everything can be reduced to a spreadsheet.
Correct.
So, David, on the rural versus urban again, how important is having or seeing where the infrastructure investment is going in locational decisions for private sector investment?
I mean, I think, obviously, and a lot of the larger users, they're not happy bedfellows with a high-density urban environment, so they do need to go somewhere in a big field sometimes. I think if you're going to attract a wide pool of private sector investment, you need clarity and certainty. 99% of the time, you look at a site based on how well connected is it now? Because you've got no ability to back off any risk against something happening in the future. Even if something has been announced, you'd think it probably won't happen. So, and I think what it probably does, it also detracts from potentially the right type of developers or investors or companies. And it's really only the people who are either massive or can take a super long-term view. And if you're going to sort of boil it down, what do you want, where and when? You want the right and the best people delivering that, but you've got to kind of facilitate those diverse range of investment decisions to be made. It might be a different type of end user, a different sort of length of capital, different type of capital coming in from a different source. They're going to want to see, right, what are the risks on site? So what are the things I can affect, but also I can't affect something outside the boundary, particularly, transport's basically impossible to sort out if it's not already there. You have to have a huge scheme to be able to fund a decent shift in a local transport network. So unless it's in, you're going to make a decision based on what's there now.
Yep.
The rural bit specifically obviously then comes down to this bananas and NIMBYs and stuff. But really, if there is a motorway junction or if there's a rail node, it doesn't really matter if it's rural or urban. It's can you get stuff from A to B? That will be the key decision maker. If you can get people to work there, it's a bonus. But they're not going to look at if you can get people to work there if you can't get the stuff there.
So if there is a level of connectivity already, then that obviously works out better with viability, so you don't have to pay for it all because you can't. And private sector can't be expected to foot the bill for all of the infrastructure to unlock large-scale employment generators.
I mean, I think just to add to that, I've been involved in a couple of schemes where there have been infrastructure projects either loosely associated with it or effectively burdening projects, which has made them unviable.
Yeah.
And some of those schemes, frankly, are just near to infrastructure projects, and when the planning was granted, it was the time when they could put an SPD in place, or the Section 106s effectively needed to put the money somewhere. And then as a result, they're not built.
Yeah.
So, well, it's not really the point, is it? If there is a vision to create some jobs and opportunity there, making it completely unviable to build the space, you would have been best off not putting the policy in place in the first place.
Yeah. Claire, you wanted to say something, I think?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of chip in with a bit of a real world perspective, with my kind of South West Business Council hat on, because if we kind of stand back from the day job, we're not generating growth in the country as a whole. Unemployment is rising. If we don't generate growth, we're not going to pay for infrastructure. We're not going to generate public service or pay for public services. I think the government is trying to prioritise growth, through its plan for change. We talk about unlocking growth, kickstarting growth, but we've not managed to do that collectively. It's been quite stubborn. I don't think that has necessarily washed through the whole system yet. So people on the front line are probably still asking for, extraordinary Section 106 requests, which make things unviable, probably aren't being flexible about renegotiating Section 106s and things like that. But there is a great amount of international investment that could come to the UK. We need to start thinking about the UK being in competition with other countries, and we need to create the conditions for growth and investment here that are better than in some of our competitive countries. And when you're doing something like Gravity, you're part of that competitive process. You don't often know who you're competing against, and what country it is, but you are competing. What I'm seeing at the moment also is a business in the southwest that wants to grow. Its facilities, £1 billion investment to create lots of jobs, but can't do that, needs to move somewhere else. and is now looking to the north versus the south. So that's an interesting challenge, isn't it? Is that where is that company best placed? So I say, well, give me your investment criteria. What ideally would you like? You know, I'm neutral now, I've got no geography. Okay, you'd like to be close to a port, you'd like to be close to, you know, X, Y, and Z. You can actually look at where sites might be best suited. And of course, they're close to motorway junctions. Are sites available? Are they in the local plan? All that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it is competitive, you know, within regions, across regions, into Europe, but capturing investment and delivering investment, we're still not good at it. You know, we can do it occasionally, you know, when large transformation projects come along, but actually we've all got to get much better at doing it because we have got to unlock growth and we have got to deliver investment.
So you just, you know, triggered something that I thought of earlier, is that, and this is potentially a perverse outcome of devolution, is that with the full fiscal powers in a particular area that's got a line around it, that can suck up investment and leave investment gaps in the city or economic gaps in the UK, and you know, so you can have these regional strengths and engines of growth because they've got fiscal powers. But other places don't get anything because the investment will make locational decisions to go there because they know that there's an integrated pipeline and a funding stream, and national government is going to fund it and all of those kind of things. And that's, you know, I think kind of links to what you're saying about what's happening in the southwest, where they're going elsewhere to the north, probably because they feel it's
you
more
might
likely
get
to
regions
happen.
competing as well. So if you have strong regions, you might have competition, as opposed to looking at the business or the investor and actually having a conversation with them about how do we as a country best meet that investor's needs when we have to be grown up about going, okay, well, that needs to go to Manchester versus Birmingham or versus Bristol, you know, when you're really, really focusing on delivering investment in the country.
You're filling me with horror, actually. The idea that this is central planning again.
Goodness
and that
me.
was a disaster. So
No, I'm just saying we need to be aware of those.
I absolutely agree that we need to be planning for opportunity is fine, and competition between regions is fine, so long as you're not then preventing that competition from being effective by adding layers of bureaucracy and decision making and all the rest of it. But I think the idea that we should have some sort of, you know, we've done it. We've had this sort of central investment agencies, and they'd be telling, first piece of consultancy I ever did years ago, when we had industrial development certificates, and you couldn't go somewhere unless you had had that discussion. And what happened? Nobody went to Plymouth because that's where I was trying to get somebody to go to at the time. Sorry. So I think that we need to be more open and more flexible, and the whole sort of planning structures drive you down the centralising, modelling, bureaucratic position, which we have to get away from, otherwise we won't attract the investment. Sorry, so I disagree with you.
To your point earlier, though, it's a bit of a bet on the future.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, I'm not sure if I quoted you exactly, but roughly that.
Yeah.
Whether it's a local investor or a global investor, if stuff's already there, the infrastructure's there, power, transport, people, it's a much easier sell. And obviously, you've got to get to the point where you've got to back a horse, haven't you, in a race. And if we're up against 10 countries or 10 regions, you've got to say, what is our best chance of winning? And if you're up against a scheme where the infrastructure's already in, no matter what case you make, it's really difficult to say, come here, it's brilliant, because, well, I can go there. It's just, it's ready.
Yeah, so either it's already there or there's a greater degree of certainty that it is coming. Erica, you said, I think you
I
wanted
was
to make
just
a
going
point.
to say, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I was just going to say there is a balance to be made here. So I think it is, you know, I think the opportunity of devolution and putting the levers in the hands of the people who understand what they want for their region and they've got those plans is a really good thing. But you do need a coherent UK investment prospectus that you can then also be selling outside of the UK. And so what you don't really want is that inside of that there's too much competition. But that takes a lot of coordination. And I don't mean like coordination in an economic sense. I mean coordination in terms of in a policy sense. And that, I think, is where we haven't quite got that right yet. And that is where, as we go through devolution, and the big push that I'm seeing right now in terms of devolution is particularly with the local innovation work that's going on. So obviously that's the thing that I'm most interested in, is the, just like any other government program, a push to get the money out there. And now we've got to see whether actually that money can be spent effectively. So there's a lot of that going on, but not necessarily at a central government level, enough understanding of who's actually in charge of that and who is going to understand whether it's working or not. And that works across that whole system that you're creating in those places. So that's the transport element, the housing element, the skills element, and the innovation element that kind of comes together to create growth. So we've got to, definitely that's a really good thing to have in place. Let's not say that it's not. I think it's a really good thing to have in place. But then remembering that you also need that overarching view, and you need somebody there who is willing to intervene and say, actually, we might need to meddle a little bit here because there is a balance that isn't happening, or there's some learning that's happening over here that's not being shared over there. And remember that there is a UK PLC that needs to be supported in all of that as well.
This is one of the most centralised government systems in the Western world, or possibly in the world, for all I know, and it hasn't served us well. Mm-hmm. And indeed, if we talk about Manchester, the rebirth of Manchester was all about Howard Bernstein, Richard Leese getting together and saying, right, we're going to do this for ourselves, and going out there and getting the foreign investment, and out of that building the city deals and the start of devolution. Yeah. So I'm really sceptical about the ability of central government actually to pick up these balls and do something positive with them, unless and until there's enough countervailing institutions like you've built in Manchester and that we're trying to build in other main cities. And then I think there's a chance to do it in other places as well, which is slightly smaller, because the evidence of the centralisation of this economy is really not good.
And I would suggest that I agree, but I think it's about the skills and the allocation of responsibility inside that government institution. I still think it's useful and needed. But
well, I agree. We need some kind of central government.
Okay,
but I think the balance is in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So on that bit of grit in the oyster, can we start open for Q&A? Time has flown. I've still got a million questions I want to ask, but we're not going to get there. These lovely people, have waited all day to ask questions. There's a hand over there. Look at the 5-minute sign.
no expense spared.
It could be really quick then. Thanks, really interesting conversation that you're having. I just want to ask, you talked a bit about, a couple of you talked about the importance of proximity to motorway junctions. What about rail? What about the rail network? Is that important in the whole mix of business? And if not, why not?
Who wants to tackle that one? Is that directed at that particular person?
Well, the two people that spoke specifically about...
Yeah, rail is really difficult to crack from a logistics perspective because obviously there's a fragmented number of companies operating opcos. The bridges are too low in a lot of Yorkshire. They're designed for coal and bits and pieces like that. You've got to find a pathway to get on the network. And then you've got to have an operator, and they're obviously, GB Rail Freight is going to take over some of the distribution network, but it's blooming difficult to find a scheme that has the potential. I've just been quoted £110 million for rail connection on a site, so that's not going to happen. And then even if we did put it in, there's no guarantee somebody wants it anyway. So it's really, and obviously the concept of getting freight on the rail is perfect. The ports tend to be rail connected. If you can get the freight up the country, it's quicker and greener, but it's really difficult to get everything kind of linked together. And I think that's certainly one where it is that national scale. Somebody needs to say, we need to make a decision to do this for a region or an agglomeration of regions. Rail freight needs to be here. And what's that national infrastructure to make it happen? Because there's a couple of private sector examples, and like Tesco Rail Connected. There's a couple of other companies, but other than that, it's difficult. I was going to swear then, but it's really tricky. And for most developers, you look at a site and go, it's got a potential for rail connection. We'll sit on it. We'll develop it anyway. And if someone approaches us, it's kind of there. We're ready to respond to the inquiry rather than being proactive.
So one of the real difficulties is to get the thing on freight onto a rail system. You need about 150-mile minimum trip. And not many freight trips are that long in the UK. So there's a length problem. And generally speaking, it's more profitable to the rail system to have a passenger train on that system, put the people on the trains and put the lorries on the road, because there's going to almost certainly have to be a truck at some point for the last mile. So in fact, that's why the economics of it is quite difficult. But rail matters enormously, both for delivery for people into the centre of cities and that sort of collection process. And equally, we probably need to think more about some of the light rail options, trams, and so on. There's in fact, simultaneously to here, Nicola Small is talking about the very light rail possibility. I mean, it needs to get regulatory approval, which would make trams much more easy to do, or guided bus, and those sorts of systems as well for smaller volumes. Heavy rail works for large numbers of people, moving them from into a city or from city to city.
Yeah,
it's just the economics of it.
So I spoke to Nicola last week, but there was an innovator that was at the same discussion, and they are repurposing passenger trains to put small freight parcels in it. And that's using trains that are already in the timetable and already on the track. So there are ways to do it, and then using EVs to distribute at last mile. So there's a lot of innovation that's coming out of that space. But any other questions? Over there, run. We've only got 4 minutes.
It's a long one.
Hello. So when you were talking about earlier about how if the place already has good existing infrastructure or good transport, then by no doubt that it is much more appealing for maybe to the government to put the employment-led opportunities or invest the employment opportunities led there. How would you make the case then for sort of shifting away from the places with existing good infrastructure to places that need existing good infrastructure to have better economic growth in that region?
Is that directed to a particular person?
Just anyone.
It is hard. It is very hard, because you're saying that if you put, and that's the enabling point, if you can change the infrastructure and put the housing in place, then you can turn it round. It is much easier to make a case for something with a pinch point, and you can remove the pinch point, and you can do that maybe with a roundabout or a new junction or whatever it is. It's much easier. To say that you can transform somewhere is much harder, but and that's where you need the vision, and you need to be prepared to make the bet.
Yeah, be bold. So, has anyone else got a question, or do you all want to just go now? It's been a long day, and we're over time, but we did start late. But so, if there's no more questions, are there any questions? Don't want to exclude anyone from asking a burning question. Then I have a question, one last question for the panel members, and this is going to be a difficult one. And it's a provocation. If you could make one reform, just one, only one, on things that you would change in the UK that links transport, investment and employment and economic growth, what would you either scrap, change or devolve first? Who wants to start?
I think there's something about further fiscal devolution, but there's also something about fiscal reform. We didn't get to the debate about, about who should pay for what. Yeah. But the only certain thing is the transport infrastructure that we've delivered here has largely been paid for by taxpayers, be that central government, or through local government. There's huge beneficiaries of the investment that we've made, be that landowners, businesses, homeowners, and without sort of drawing politics into it at all, there's also central government have been a key beneficiary, and one of our Devo deals developed an earn-back mechanism whereby we invested locally, thick end of £1 billion, and we did a deal with government to enable us to earn some of that back, because what we invested has has delivered returns to the Exchequer, as well as delivering returns to a number of to a number of other local beneficiaries. So there's something about reforming as well as devolving the fiscal position.
Excellent. And we didn't even get into innovative finance mechanisms besides government funding. Claire, reform. What would you do?
I would really like to see a further streamlining and rationalisation of the planning system. I don't think the Planning and Infrastructure Bill goes far enough. I had a nice chat with Mr Quatermain a couple of months ago about was it going to make a difference, and we both thought no. So I would really like to see further simplification and rationalisation and a cultural change, which I think is missing from the work at the moment, and actually making sure we get messages through to the front line that economic growth is vital for the country as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that pain every day. Okay. Bridget?
Agree with both of those, but I'm going to add split the Treasury into...
More grit?
So you have a finance department and you have an economics department, which is what most other countries have. And it would undermine the dead hand of Treasury, which I think builds on Steve's point as well.
Brilliant.
Mine would be that request that the infrastructure strategy and then its implementation, guided by NISTA, is forcing the hand on an investment in every one of those investments being around innovation.
Excellent. David,
I'm last, so I'll just take the opportunity to have two, I guess. So I think once the decision's made, just build it. Lock it in. It's got, decision done. Get the investment flow in. Then once someone can rely on it. And the second one is B Network's brilliant. So a slightly bigger tram at 8 o'clock in the morning from Charlton would be great. Cause it's too popular.
Have you got any money to pay for it?
Absolutely. Well, I do tap on and off.
Good.
So.
So on that, Jem, that I think we've run out of time. We thank you very much to the panel. If you could just thank them in the way that we normally thank the panel. It's been brilliant. Thank you very much. As usual, not enough time. Thank you, and enjoy your evenings, and maybe I'll see some of you tomorrow.